That was the sentence my father threw at me. Not with words, but with his entire life. My father, Roy Mercer, has run a landscaping company for over 30 years. To him, the only people who deserved to be called men were the ones with blisters on their heels from digging soil. My name is Ethan Mercer. I'm 23, and I built a financial tech startup from a tiny apartment where I used to sleep on the floor and eat instant noodles for 2 years straight. No one knew. No one believed in it. Especially not my father, a man who's always believed success is earned through calloused hands and sweat-soaked collars. He's operated that landscaping business in Charleston, South Carolina, for 3 decades, and in his eyes, I was just a soft kid, one who played with computers instead of picking up a shovel. Growing up, I spent every summer mowing lawns, hauling dirt, moving trees, under the brutal southern sun. For a while, I thought maybe someday I'd follow in his footsteps. But then, I chose college. I chose tech. I chose a path he saw as running away from the real world. 3 years later, I came home, right in time for our family's annual Memorial Day barbecue. The same tradition where the whole family gathered to watch my father glow with pride behind the grill. Surrounded by guests who called him a master of the earth. I didn't bring flowers, no gifts, no warning, just one thing, a bright red Ferrari Roma, and a story no one in my family had ever heard before. The moment that engine roared from down the street, the backyard laughter stopped, heads turned, eyes squinted in the sun. I parked right next to my father's old work truck, the same one he always called his pride, the proof of 40 years sweating in the dirt. I stepped out, in my hand, just a key fob, and suddenly, it was like time had frozen. My mom raised a hand to her mouth, and my dad, he stood by the grill, spatula in hand, frozen mid-flip. No one said a word. No one knew what the hell was happening. And finally, after all these years, they were looking at me, not as the lost kid, but as a man who had walked through the dark, and come back from the other side of the dream. Sorry I'm late, I said calmly. Traffic from New York was brutal. I started working for my dad when I was 12, while my friends played baseball under the trees. I was learning how to mow grass without scalping the roots, how to carry bags of soil without ripping them open, how to stay silent under 100-degree sun while digging flower beds on a customer's deadline. Every night, I came home with my legs drained, hands stained with tree sap, shirt soaked with sweat and dust stuck to my back. My dad never said, "Good job, son." He'd just glance at me from head to toe and mutter, "Get up earlier tomorrow." So I did. I woke up earlier, learned to work like a shadow, present, but never praised. 6 summers in a row. It was the same. I worked for him, no paycheck, no thanks, not even a nod of approval. I didn't blame him. Back then, I thought, maybe that was his way of raising a man. But everything changed the day I got into the business program at the University of South Carolina. I remember handing him the acceptance letter, like a kid bringing home his first big trophy. He barely looked at it, scoffed. College kids think they know everything until they have to live in the real world. He pulled a crumpled $20 bill from his wallet and stuffed it into my hand, like he was handing travel money to a stranger. And that was his version of a send-off. My mom didn't say much around him. But that night, while I was packing, she stepped into my room and quietly placed a small envelope in my hand. Inside, $500. The bills were a little worn. No doubt saved from her modest salary as a schoolteacher. She just said one thing, soft as breath, "Do what makes you happy. But whatever it is, do it well." Then she stepped out, gently closing the door behind her. So gently, I didn't even hear it shut. That's when I knew I was walking into a world no one in my family believed in. A place I'd have to navigate alone. And if I failed, no one would be there to catch me. So I left, not angry, just carrying one quiet promise in my heart. To become someone, not to prove anyone wrong, but to earn the freedom to live life my way. Time in college flew by faster than I expected. By my sophomore year, I started building a financial algorithm, a model to analyze and predict market trends. It started with a moment in class. A professor was lecturing about inequities in data access for small investors. That phrase stuck with me. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just started writing code late at night, after dorm lights were off. Then one day, that same professor looked over my shoulder at the model I'd built on my laptop. He didn't speak right away, just stared for a long time. Then finally, he said, "You don't even know what you've got here. If you build this right, this could change how everyday people invest." That sentence was like a single match in a pitch-black tunnel. Enough to light the way. Just a little. So I dropped out. I knew my dad would be furious. I knew my mom would cry. But I wasn't chasing some temporary dream. I was betting my entire youth on the only thing that made me feel truly alive. So I moved into a crummy little apartment in the outskirts of Columbia with 2 friends. We split rent, lived on ramen, turned off the AC in the summer, slept under piles of blankets in the winter. I had no salary, no investors. I knocked on the doors of every venture capital firm I could find, sent out hundreds of emails, and got just as many rejections. They said I was too young, said I lacked experience, said the market was saturated. Every rejection email? I printed it out and pinned it to the wall, like I was building a roadmap made from everyone else's doubts, to remind myself exactly what I had to break through. Meanwhile, my dad still called, but not to check on me. He only called to mock me. That Thanksgiving, I went home. At dinner, he introduced me to the guests as my son who's messing around with computers, waiting to win the tech lottery, I guess. Then Christmas came. He handed me a job listing from his company. Warehouse manager minus $16 per hour. He said, "Real work. You can't live off that imaginary stuff in your computer." I didn't argue. Didn't need to. Because even on the coldest winter nights, while the world slept, I was still coding, eyes sunken, hands shaking from hunger. But my heart stayed warm. Because deep down, I knew I was building something real. Then one April morning, it happened. I was standing in the kitchen, holding a cup of cold coffee, when I saw the subject line, Black Pine Capital, interest in exclusive licensing proposal. I read it, then read it again, 17 times. Coffee spilled onto the floor. I didn't even notice. One of the largest investment firms in the Northeast wanted to acquire my entire tech platform. The offer? $14 million. I called my roommate, Zach, the guy who stuck by me the whole way. "You did it," he screamed, so loud I had to yank the phone from my ear. Then I called my mom. She cried. But this time, they were tears of relief, of pride, of belief. I didn't call my dad. Not out of anger, but because I wasn't ready to hear him dismiss me again. But I knew there would be a way to make sure he couldn't look away this time. A few days after signing the contract in New York, I walked into a Ferrari dealership, wearing a faded t-shirt and frayed jeans. At first, the salespeople didn't even glance my way. They were busy chatting with a guy in a suit, eyeing a silver sports car. But the moment I asked, which of these can be paid for in a single wire transfer, everything changed. 2 hours later, I drove off the lot in a fire-red Ferrari Roma, the roar of the engine screaming a truth I no longer had to say out loud. I didn't buy it because I loved cars, and definitely not to show off. I bought the car because some messages need to be heard, even by those who refuse to listen. So I drove straight to Charleston, unannounced. I knew it was Memorial Day weekend, the annual backyard barbecue where my father loved to show off what he called true, hard-earned success to relatives, clients, and old friends. I timed my arrival precisely, right when everyone would be gathered in the backyard. As soon as the wheels of my car hit the driveway, the engine's growl cut through every conversation. Heads turned, a few soft whistles floated through the air, and when I parked right next to my father's old pickup, the one he proudly called proof of 40 years of sweat, the entire backyard went still. I stepped out in a plain white shirt, sneakers, and held nothing in my hand but the key fob. My mother, who'd never even seen me drive anything decent, raised her hand to her mouth. Her eyes glassed over. My father stood by the grill, spatula in hand, one side of a steak still burning. I walked over and said, "Sorry I'm late. Traffic from New York was rough." He turned toward me, Forced a smile. That overly familiar grin people wear when playing host. Well, look who showed up. Finally remembered you had a home. Huh? He slapped my back, too hard. A gesture meant to say, still just the kid I raised. Nothing's changed. Then he glanced over at the car. Smirked. Borrowed that from someone? Not bad. I looked him dead in the eyes. Didn't borrow it. I bought it. Yesterday. A few guests chuckled, assuming it was a joke. My dad laughed too. Sure. And next you're buying your own private jet, right? I didn't respond. I just pulled out a folded sheet of paper. The title certificate to the Ferrari. And handed it to him. He took it, scanned it quickly, then folded it neatly. Handed it back. Which rich buddy of yours believed in that crap? He muttered. Then turned back to flip the meat on the grill. Like the entire moment hadn't even happened. For the rest of the party, I tried to talk to him. Tried to tell him about the technology. About the vision. About the company. But every time I opened my mouth, he cut me off. Pointed at the neighbor's lawn. Commented on how well they trimmed the grass. Asked someone to grab more beer. Talked about how he once fixed a generator back in '92. Not once did he ask, what does your software actually do? Or, why did someone pay $14 million for it? And when his old friend Pete brought up the Wall Street Journal article about me, my father interrupted with a scoff. Don't believe everything reporters say. They exaggerate for a living. In that moment, I wasn't angry. I just felt empty. Because I realized, to him, I wasn't the son who went out and came back with a dream fulfilled. I was still just the shadow of something he couldn't accept. Proof that there was another way. One he never chose. Near the end of the party, most guests had already left. I saw my dad sitting alone in his small office out back. Light still on. That was always his routine. After the fun, he'd sit and review receipts. Tally up costs. Like joy itself needed to be itemized. I knocked. Then stepped in. The smell of old paper, sweat, and peppermint cigarettes hit me. Pulled me back to when I was 14. Standing in that same room. After spilling gasoline into the lawnmower. Back then, he'd yelled at me until I cried. But now, I wasn't that boy anymore. I want to talk, I said. He didn't look up. Eyes fixed on a bill in his hand. About that tech thing of yours? I nodded. Not just that. About the company. The deal. About me. He sighed. Nothing to talk about, Ethan. So you got lucky with some computer thing. So what? Don't think a few $1,000,000 means you know how to live. I took a deep breath. It's not a few $1,000,000. It's 14 million. And I built it on my own. No loans. No favors. I did something you never believed was possible. This time, he looked up. His eyes narrowed. Like he was squinting at a bright sun he didn't want to face. You know what built this family? He said, pointing to an old photo on the wall. In the picture, he's barely 20, standing next to his first truck. That smile still greasy with engine oil and young ambition. 40 years. 40 years busting my back outside. Sun, rain, mud. And what did you do? Sit at a keyboard and wait for an email with money in it? That's work too, I replied. Not everyone has to dig a hole to have value. Work? He scoffed, dry and sharp. You built an investing app? You play with other people's money? And that's supposed to be value. You think that's gonna last? Guys like you, you're flashes. You come and go. Wall Street sharks will eat you alive. And when the money dries up, you'll come crawling back here, begging for a job. And I'll be the one explaining to everyone why my kid failed. I stood still, fists clenched until my knuckles turned white. Not because he was wrong, but because, buried inside those words, was fear. Fear that if I succeeded, it meant the path he chose was already obsolete. That maybe, I, not him, represented the future. I turned away, said nothing more. In the kitchen, my mother was washing the last of the glasses. Her back hunched just slightly. Eyes still red. From laughter she tried hiding in her sleeve. She turned when she saw me standing there. He doesn't hate you, she said softly. I nodded. No, Mom. He doesn't hate me. He's afraid of me. She opened her mouth to speak again. But didn't. The next morning, I was sitting in a cafe downtown. When my phone buzzed, a text from Ben, my cousin. The only one in the family who'd ever asked about my tech. The only one who'd sent me the Wall Street Journal article. With a shocked face emoji. Hey Ethan, Uncle Roy told everyone at church your deal was fake. Said you rented that car to show off. Said you're being sued for fraud. I set my coffee down. A cold chill ran through my chest. It wasn't anger. It was certainty. I knew I couldn't just let this slide. Not to teach him a lesson, but because I had to protect what I'd built. Even if my hands never touched dirt, they were soaked in sweat just the same. So I left the cafe that morning. Didn't go home. Didn't send another word. I booked a small hotel room downtown, just 10 minutes from my parents' house. But I didn't go back. I needed space. To think. To plan. To brace for what I knew was coming. Either my father's collapse, or his transformation. The next day, I got another text. This one from Zach, my old roommate. The guy who'd watched me go so broke I had to sell my desk to buy more data. Dude, your dad just came to the old apartment, asking me a million questions. About the money, the contract, your company's future. I didn't say anything, just told him you were out of town. A few hours later, I got a call.